Alright, time for another DraftScience video presentation. You're on YouTube anyway. DraftPhysicsElsewhere.com. Anyway. Alright, so a little bit on the 1/2 mv squared and the argument that it's basically Sasquatch they've put into actual physics. So it's comparable to a biologist saying that Sasquatch is a real part of evolutionary history, that Sasquatch really does exist, that there is a Sasquatch, and that we all have to accept his existence, and he's all part of the story. This equation is a Sasquatch. It's just something where somebody looked at something with a crooked lens and said, oh, that's a Sasquatch, when it was really just a bear, taking a leak by a tree. And it's that obvious. It's overt. It's the facts are the facts. This can't be explained away as anything reasonable. It's a completely unreasonable, unevidenced piece of junk as a statement. And here it is, a fundamental core equation in physics. It's being cited as part of the reason why Einstein drew his conclusions. It's part of it's an integral part of the history, the existence of this living force. That's what it was called. It had to be called something different because there was no way to account for its existence. It was completely anti what Newton had revealed about the universe. So it was anti-Newton. It was hostile, to reasoning, in the sense that it came from nowhere and it disappeared to nowhere. It didn't play any real role because it couldn't be manufactured to do it. So, I'm sure there are many experiments, maybe somebody can find them, that demonstrate that energy is conserved, and there is only there's only energy. Now, we can use subcategories and we can say, oh, there's kinetic and there's potential. Those are two categories that have to have all the energy in them. You can take energy from one category and place it in another category. But let's understand, when somebody says something has potential energy, it means that either they're going to exploit some other part of the energy universe. That is, they're going to look on the outside and say, are you in gravity? Well, that doesn't mean the thing has energy. Until I fall in gravity, right? Until gravity affects my matter, I don't have any velocity. I don't have any products. I can't say I have the potential. Gravity will give me the potential as it pushes me, but I won't have it until it affects me. Okay, so I can't say it's my potential energy. And likewise, if my chemistry is made out of dynamite, there's no point in me walking around saying I have, this potential energy. It's not really me, the person, it's me, the chemistry. And so this also just messes up this argument. Is this lack of ability to understand. You can convert kinetic energy into potential. That is, you can, use your momentum to acquire position on top of a mountain, and now you can roll off the mountain through gravity. But it's not energy you have until you start rolling. You don't have any kinetic energy, and you don't have really any potential energy until something starts moving you. It's just kind of silly to say it's something you possess. You don't possess the mountain, But that's only two places it can go. It can't go someplace else and you still argue the thing has the same momentum. So momentum is your mass times your velocity. It just has to do with what you have overtly. It's kinetic and you have it. There is no potential component of momentum. It just doesn't exist. You can't have you can't until you exercise your potential. You don't have any momentum. So before I blow up, if I'm dynamite, I don't have any momentum. I can give my little tiny pieces momentum, but I'll never have any momentum. All right, so just this illustration, okay, so just to understand what they're saying. They're saying that if I had this Newton's cradle, I could make one. And unfortunately, they complicate it by having too many balls in the scenario. Because we're really just talking about the conversion of the heavy masses, slower velocity, into more velocity and less mass of some other object, and whether you can make these conversions. and that when the little thing leaves, it's going to leave at 4 times the velocity. Okay, not, you know, and that's just, it's not going to happen. It won't have 4 times the velocity. It won't have 4 times the energy. It'll have twice the velocity, and that's all. And that's all the momentum it'll have, and there'll be no other place for it to go. And this is supposed to be an illustration of a very clean experiment. That is, the transfer of energy is almost complete. The pendulum continues to swing very well with one ball, and it lasts for quite a while, indicating there aren't any losses of energy. So it's a very clean way to transfer energy. So you can't say, oh, there was a bunch of losses. Well, there wasn't. All right, so this doesn't work very well because the heavy mass, they didn't have it lined up with the other masses, so you end up scattering rather than doing the right thing. So here's the opposite example. So a little thing comes crashing in. Now it came in from off the screen, and really what you're saying is how much distance did it cover, and that's basically an illustration of its energy, and it, you know, combined with its mass. And so the big ball doesn't go nearly off the camera. So clearly it goes, the speed at which it left is slower. And now it comes back. And you'll see that there's not going to be 4 times the velocity here. It's not going to, the little one's not going to leave at 4 times the velocity. No, it's not, that's, I'm saying it the wrong way. It's 4 times the energy, so it doesn't go 4 times as far away. So you see that it just about went, you know, just as far away. It should have gone twice as far. So this one, obviously, this one moving absorbed some of the energy. It moved this other big one because this had enough energy to do that. So again, it's not a very good illustration. So instead of relying on this, I will just draw an illustration that just can't be undone. The logic of it is so simple and obvious. So we could do it with pool balls, or we could do it with trains, or we could do it with any of this stuff. Oh, I don't need to move that camera. It's not on. And right, so if I did have just, if I had, you know, pool balls, and I could just double the mass of one, all right, and you could understand that it was always a kinetic interaction. That is, when they hit, they're going to completely exchange their energy. And then I have another one that has a 1 as a mass. So I have one that's twice as heavy as the other. The simple argument is, okay, is if I hit into this one here, it's going to only, all I can do is transfer the energy of this one, the momentum, the mass times the velocity. And all that's going to happen to this one is mass times velocity. That is, it has half the mass, so the energy has to increase its velocity, and it's going to leave, okay, at twice the velocity of this one. So this one came in with a velocity of, say, 2, and this one's going to leave with a velocity of 4 because it has half the mass. And then again, if I hit another 2 object with this one, all I'm going to get is back to where I was. I'm going to get exactly the same thing I had here, which is I'm going to have a velocity of 2, okay, and I have the mass of 2. And that's it. The transfer is always going to, these two things can't have different amounts of energy. So by their formula, they're saying this object, okay, even though you know they all have the same energy, they're saying this object has twice as much energy. Their formula, 1/2 mv squared, right? So just understand what they've done to this equation is they basically bisected two things that have an equal contribution. You just saw it, it's equal. And they're saying the mass is half important and the velocity is squared. And this doesn't work. I mean, if they said 1/2 the mass and 2v, okay, at least it would add up. You know, at least you could make that make sense, but you cut the mass in half and you increase the velocity by 2. All right, that will work. That at least you now you have the same amount of stuff. Total stuff is still the same. So that would be a description of, you could play with the momentum if you want and pretend that this stuff kind of happened. At least you'd have the same number. But what's critical here is this number ends up equaling more energy, more joules. So they're saying that here, this thing had 15 joules of energy, 15 watts, let's say, 15 horsepower. And then they're saying this one had 25. And then they're saying this one only has 15 again. So let's understand just how non-consistent with anything reasonable this theory was. So this theory is proposed based on experiments with clay, not experiments with multiple ways of detecting energy, not using springs or some other more consistent mechanism. And the results can't be verified in any kind of rational way because there's nowhere for the energy to go. There's no way this thing acquired more joules of energy, more electrons, more anything. It couldn't do that. It can't create extra momentum in a direction. So as I've stated before, you can think of momentum as a vector, as a line. It has a certain length and it has a direction. If you're going to have an interaction, that line can never be destroyed. So, and if you convey it completely to some other object, okay, you gave it the same momentum, so you have less velocity, therefore you must have more mass, so it moves slower. But it's still the same vector, so it's still the same length. And until you do something, if you're going to have heat happen or some other losses, it has to come out of this vector. This vector can't stay the same then if there are losses. All right, it has to get shorter. The momentum has to drop. The momentum is the real measure of energy. Newton was right. Newton's simple statement, mv equals energy, that's all you need. Okay, it equals momentum. Momentum equals energy. The momentum of an electron, the momentum of a proton, the momentum of an atom, the momentum of a piece of chemistry, a molecule, the momentum of a human being, the momentum of a rock, the momentum of anything. That's energy. There's no other kind of energy. There's no living force, okay, that compels something to have more energy because it has more velocity. Velocity doesn't give it energy. Mass and velocity gives it energy. I don't know how else this. I didn't do that one even perfectly yet. But there's no room for this mushy talk about how the kinetic energy doesn't have to be conserved when there's no potential energy in the equation. Pool balls going across a table. There is no potential energy. There's just kinetic energy, and you can't say I can throw away some kinetic energy, okay, and I keep the same momentum. It's impossible to say it and be reasonable. It's a Sasquatch argument. It's nonsense. You've clearly made a mistake. Okay, you've used the wrong instruments to detect reality. All right, so I wanted to get on to this other subject that's in this the video of Einstein's story, because you can just see where a little bit of extra thought, and physics could have gotten the right answer instead of the wrong answer. I have to bring that back because it steals it. All right. So this is a Nova documentary. It's really well done. It's a nice little story. Got lots of little bits in it of recreating the history, and it's who knows who knows how close it is to anything real. Usually taking from letters and such. What the hell did I do with the cleaning device? I will need this again, no doubt. Give it time to dry. All right. So leave us continue. So some of this is not too relevant, but you'll grin and bear it, and we'll just get to some of these basic subjects. So this is about E equals mc squared. I would argue that obviously this is sort of a convenience, the c squared thing. You're just talking about a preposterously big number, and the big number is really not a measurement of the energy of mass. It's just a measurement of the fact that mass is in a universe of energy, and every bit of mass is reflecting the universe. And if you thought of it that way, well, maybe I'll do that first, just as a context, and then you'll get where I'm going with this, I think. So So what I'm arguing is that the universe has two things in it, force and matter. And the force is just little vectors, little bits of momentum traveling, in a direction, just as pointed out. A little piece of momentum, a little piece of mass and velocity. Okay, that's the force bits. And the matter bits are like electrons and protons, are just bubbles. You could argue they're just little bubbles in this sea of little bits, or they're little pole balls. You can make them anything. And the truth is this this field of energy hits them, okay, and eventually, okay, 99.99999% of it reflects, okay, in a sense. That's all it's really going to do. Is a certain amount's going to come in and a certain amount's going to go out. And the only trick to it is just understanding a simple little principle, that only one bit of force can interact with it at a time, like really interact. So like a force would hit and it would stick, and then it would move the object, and the object would keep going that way until some other bit of force hit from one of these opposite directions, And as soon as something hits from the opposite direction, then this little bit will leave and this one will reflect, and this thing will stop moving. And that's how matter moves in this field. So the only thing the matter's doing is, in a sense, only while a piece of force is stuck to it, it's kind of stealing a little bit of the energy of the force. Okay, so the force bit is being used to move the matter, and that means the force bit is moving slower than the speed of light. So if a force bit was to hit a piece of matter, the point would be is that force bit should be here if it didn't hit the matter, and because it did hit the matter, it's going to end up being here in space. So it lost a little tiny bit of distance, which is a little bit of its energy. And that's the only energy being consumed by matter. So when matter moves someplace, it consumes a little bit of energy to get to that place. And basically that creates gravity, and you can explain everything else. But the real point is you can sort of understand that at any one moment, the piece of matter is only absorbing a tiny bit of the energy of the universe, and the rest of it is basically going to reflect. Okay, and it's just a matter of where it reflects from. So if I was here, the energy, this piece of energy would reflect, and it would be here in space. But if I move this from point A to point B instead, you can understand that this piece of energy now will be here. Okay, it's going to be in a different place because I moved a piece of matter. So the matter's reflecting the universe. That's where the idea that the mass, the m as the part of the mc squared, why it's important is because everything is going to be decided in terms of what you see as energy is going to be decided by which way this piece of matter is moving. And such. So leave us play some of this. And so very artfully done, nice music, blah blah. Like I said, a nice little storytelling.
She's
Very pretty.
yes. But can she soar and dance like our dark souls do?
Maxwell's equations contained an incredible prediction.
Okay, so this I never saw this anywhere in Maxwell's equations, so I haven't really heard the theory of what equation or what part of Maxwell's equations actually predict this. Okay, because I don't see it anywhere. I don't see it in any equation where Maxwell had any reason to make any statements about what happens to matter at the speed of light.
They said you could never catch up to a beam of light.
Right, so where did they say that? I don't see it anywhere in there. So somebody's going to have to explain that one to me. Where Maxwell's equations say you can't catch up to a piece of light. The matter can't go as fast as the force. I mean, I think it's true, but I'm just saying, where is it a statement anywhere? How does he know what happens to a magnet? at the speed of light, or even half the speed of light.
Even if you were traveling at 670 million miles an hour, you would still see light squiggle away from you at 670 million miles an hour.
No, you wouldn't. Okay, so this is the part they just made up. There's no rational reason to believe that could possibly be true. I mean, the light's traveling at a speed. I go faster and faster and faster. And the point is somehow if I shine a new piece of light, right? I'm catching up to this photon. Okay? I'm catching up to it. I'm almost catching up to it. I'm almost catching up to it. Right? And then I turn on a flashlight, and my flashlight shoots a new light beam that goes the speed of light away. Well, how come this one isn't going the speed of light away? The one I caught up to, or I'm catching up to. Doesn't make any sense. It's crazy. It's silly. There's no possible way the light can propagate away from me at that speed. And again, for their statement to be true, they have to invent this fake notion that somehow I go into some sleep state where my whole entire metabolism slows down, and it takes me 10,000 years to live 10 minutes. And so then I can see the light do that. But only if I live to be, a million years of the real universe goes by. Then I see it that way. If my eyes are open for a million years, it's just that I interpret everything at a much slower frame rate. I could slow this video down to just a frame at a time, and we could say that, okay, it took 50 hours to play the video. All right, so yeah, you could pretend, but there's no way to do that to the universe, to sit there and say, oh, a piece of the universe, I'm going to play this part of the video at that frame rate, and I'm going to play the rest of the video at some other frame rate. You can't do that. So there's no logical continuity to this nonsense.
You see how she stares at that wave?
Yes,
You see how for her it is static?
yes.
So it isn't static, right? For her, that's just perception. There are new waves being created constantly, okay? She's not seeing the same wave in the same place. There's no static. There's new waves being placed into the position constantly. So there's obviously the illusion that the waves are in one place is just an illusion. The boat's moving, the waves are being continually created, and obviously you're looking at the same distance from the boat. You're going to see the wave is in the same place, but it's not the same wave. I mean, duh.
She and the wave are traveling at the same speed. We see the wave moving through the water, but relative to her, it just sits there.
So again, there's nothing just sitting there. It's not relative to her. It's not even a perceptual trick. This is just, again, this is the spooky bullshit that's been put into science. Is, oh, it looks like. No. Big mistake.
So is light like that?
Common sense would say that if you cut up to a light beam, there would be a wave of light. Just
Okay, so there's always all this wave, which is just more nonsense. Obviously, the photons are traveling in straight lines, insane distances, and going through little tiny pupils. There's no wave of light. Hey.
sitting there, maybe it would be shimmering. A bit of electricity and a bit of magnetism.
There, so she's arguing, okay, so I'll try to explain. Yes, if I go as fast as light, then the light can't go anywhere, can't get anywhere, and it's just going to pile up. It's just going to sit there piled up because it can't go faster than me. I'm going as fast as it can go. We're in a tie. The light just can't go anywhere because it's going the same speed as me. Now, the point is the light isn't, I can't generate light. The whole argument is this light is a reflection. Light is energy reflecting off of matter. That's what it is, okay? So the only thing I can do with my matter is catch energy and project it, reflect it. And the fact is the reflections leave at the same speed I'm moving, then I'm just going to keep collecting the reflections.
So if she was traveling alongside the light wave, it wouldn't be moving. It would be static. But Maxwell says you can't have static light.
Okay, so again, you can't have static light. Well, yes, in the real world you can't have static light. So if that's what they mean by you can't catch up to a light beam, that's kind of a silly reason why it's prohibited. That's not an explanation of it. I mean, clearly, if I'm moving the same speed as the light in the same direction, all right, I'm going to arrive at a location at exactly the same time as the light. We know that when I'm halfway there, I'm at the same point that the light is, and then, you know, there's no reason to believe it wouldn't look static. But of course it's not static, because I'm not static. If I'm not static, why would I call it static? The whole premise of the argument is that I'm moving really, really fast. So why would you say Maxwell's statement that there can't be static light? Well, of course there can't be static light. It's always moving the speed of light. But if I'm looking at it from my non-static camera, you know, where my camera's moving as fast as the light is, of course it's going to look, I mean, if I'm, you know, we do this all the time. I mean, nature footage, they put a camera on a truck and they move it really fast, the same speed as the animal running. You know, they do lots of tricks to sit there and get a nice clean image. You know, make it look like it's not going anywhere when it's going somewhere.
Maybe Maxwell is wrong. Maybe if you catch up to light, it is static, Albert, like a wave next to a boat.
Yes, well, it's not really static, so it would be kind of silly, because I see it as not moving, it's not moving. So if I'm in a boat and there's another boat next to me and we're both going 40 miles an hour somewhere, I'm going to assume the other boat is static? Why would I assume that? I mean, the logic is just so paper thin. I mean, it's just so easy to poke holes in this reasoning.
Imagine if I was sitting still and holding a mirror to my face.
So this is the one that's really important, right? This is the imagine crap that was supposed to be the whole inspiration for Einstein. Well, imagine what that would be. You're holding something in front of you, an object that reflects light, you know. And so you're saying that, okay, if I'm going the speed of light, what's actually happening? Well, first you have to understand what light is, right? So let's understand that part. And this part we already know. You know, this part is already well confirmed, well established. Yes, that has to be moved to this location. Oh, I wonder if I guess I didn't fix that when I do that other drawing, did I? No, I probably didn't. Well, anyway. So you're a surface and you're going to create light, or you're going to reflect light. So in this case, we're talking about reflections. So the light has to bounce off of you and then reflect off of you. It doesn't really matter whether we're talking about emitting it or not. Now, the key point is we know the light has a frequency, and even if you believe in waves, you sort of have to get the idea that, well, the frequency has to bounce off the surface. You know, there's a, you know, and so obviously if I'm moving very fast, what I'm going to do is I'm going to compress that frequency, right? The frequency will go in, let's make the notches bigger so it's more, you know, they're going to go in this way, and if I'm moving, you know, 1/2 of the speed of light, they're going to be exactly halved. You know, the distance between these are going to be halved. So you can understand now, start going faster and faster, it's more than halved. You know, go 3/4 of the speed of light, and they're getting even smaller. And then I get closer and closer and closer. I get to the speed of light. Obviously, I'm taking all of the distance out of here. So I'm turning a piece of, you know, red light into an X-ray, and then I'm turning it into a gamma ray. You know, in terms of its frequency. Now, I'm not going to change its polarization any. That's a whole different subject. So blah blah blah. It gets a little more complicated when you start getting polarization into the subject. But anyway, the point is that you can sort of get the idea that there's a point when I'm going the speed of light that all the light that hits here, every single wave, every single bit of it, is not going to progress at all. It's not going to leave. So what's going to happen to the back of his mirror? Well, his back of his mirror, all of the photons that hit that mirror won't reflect. Okay, but the energy's still there. didn't go somewhere. It's trying to reflect. It hit, but it can't go fast, right? It's easy to hit it because it's flying at you at the speed of light, so it's really easy to hit a whole bunch of little pieces of energy, but they can't leave. They can't reflect because they can't go faster than the mirror's going. So they're all stuck here on the surface. So every single piece of energy the mirror hits the whole time Einstein's traveling at the speed of light, every single piece of energy, obviously this is true for his whole body, but I'm just giving the illustration that all he has to do is think about what's happening to the other side of the mirror, and he would get what's really happening. And if what really be happening as you're traveling through space, you're going to collect every single piece of photonic energy between the space between whatever point A and point B. So whatever point A and point B you travel at this very fast speed, you're going to collect every bit of energy and not only multiply its frequency, right? If you're going a little less than the speed of light, you're just multiplying its frequency, which is, turning it into stronger and stronger radiation. But the fact is, you're just collecting all of this energy. And when you show up at the destination B and you start to slow down, all of that stuff now can leave. And it's going to be this huge amount of energy. You collected a whole bunch of energy, and now you're going to show up at a location with kind of an E equals MC squared amount of energy. You're going to be collecting E equals MC squared. So every cubic, you could almost argue that it's in E equals MC squared would be a kilogram. So 1 kilogram, you could argue 1 kilogram has the speed of light squared number of these little force bits in it. That could be a way you would argue it. And that makes sort of sense. A kilogram is huge. You're talking about, in a kilogram, you're talking about as many apples as would fit in the earth. That's just the number of atoms. Okay. So if you turned a kilogram into the size of the earth, the atom, just the number of atoms would be the number of apples you could fit inside the earth, the mass of the earth. So, and we're not even to electrons and protons yet. So the speed of light squared becomes a realistic number where you could say every little individual electron, maybe it has 10,000 interactions a second, okay, with these little bits of force, little bits of photon. And that would be realistic. I don't know what it actually calculates down to if you actually did the calculations, but it's, maybe someday I'll attempt those. Maybe somebody who knows some math, maybe they could do that. Just go with the density of a square meter of space and the size of an electron in that square meter, and do it by square meters. I just don't know if the kilogram is the more important thing because he's saying mass. So you'd have to use the kilogram and take an average of the average density, spatial density of the average kilogram of atoms. Because each one is different weight. Anyway, didn't want to get on a side subject. Alright, so anyway, so the mirror is collecting all that energy. And on the other side, what's happening? See, he's thinking he's going to reflect light off the mirror. Well, he can't reflect light off the mirror. Because he's going too fast. Nothing can get to the mirror. And if it could get to the mirror, what's the mirror going to do with it? It's going to collect it again. Because it's moving away, so all of the light can't reflect off the mirror because the mirror keeps moving away at the speed of light. Well, anyway. So I'm just saying there's these thought experiments in this way of this kind of gooey, mystical way. You really have to do it with all the permutations. You have to recognize, well, wait a minute, the light does have a frequency. That messes the simplicity up. It's not just a little bit, a BB hitting me. It's a BB's at frequency hitting me. And then the light has a polarization. And what's going to happen to the fact that the light's a little bit out of alignment? How is that going to be changed?
The light travels from my face to the mirror, and I see my face.
Yes.
However, if I and the mirror were traveling at the speed of light...
You're going at the same speed as the light leaving your face.
Exactly.
The light never reaches the mirror.
So would I be invisible?
No, you'd be the opposite. Okay? You'd be really, really, really dangerous. Okay, because you, without the mirror is doing the same thing you're doing. And it's just collecting every single bit of energy it's plowing into. Every single bit can't leave, can't reflect. Now, if you were doing the opposite, if you're going away from the light at the speed of light, you can understand the light can never catch up to you, ever, 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 ever. So you can't collect any energy. Then you're invisible. So if you're going the opposite direction as the photons you're playing with, if somebody's looking at you from behind, then you're invisible. If somebody's looking at you from the direction you're moving, you're going to get, eventually, when you show up, really visible, because you're going to be carrying all the energy you collected on the entire trip, every bit of energy. And so this is a way of understanding what's happening inside of atoms, is what I really wanted to get to, is the fact that you could understand that that's what electrons are doing. Electrons are moving quickly, okay, at different percentages of the speed of light. And that is what they're doing, is they're collecting the energy in the universes, okay, in that little bit of space between the electron and the point it's going to. And any piece of energy that's on that path, that has a vector that's going to collide with that path at the right time, it's going to collect that energy and compress it. So it's taking energy that was here in this much space, and it's compressing it into this much space. And you can clearly understand that, okay, you could actually create a pattern. If you have a bunch of electrons doing that, you'd have a pattern created in space where there's there's more photons, or more little bits of force, less bits of force, more bits of force, less bits of force. And that you could detect that with a radio receiver, or you could detect it with an eyeball.
That doesn't make sense.
See, it does make perfect sense. The light can't leave, okay, because you're going the same speed, so you're just going to collect it all. The back of the mirror is collecting it, you're going to collect it, okay? And in that direction, you're just collecting energy. You're compressing the energy. So if you're going half the speed of light, it still works, because you're collecting all of that energy, and you're compressing it into a smaller amount of space.
Young Einstein was starting to realize that light was unlike any other kind of wave.
All right, so there's just this whole thing is just full of the wave talk. So one of the biggest mistakes in physics was this wave nonsense. There's no reason to believe it, no good reason, and certainly early on there was really no good reason. That's why they draw rays coming off the suns. That's why we even have the word ray of light, right? I mean, it exists because that's what it really, when you really look at it, when you really analyze it, that's what makes sense. It's going in straight lines, and it's, in discrete places in space. It's not spread over the whole universe. It goes in little discrete packages with polarization.
Einstein was about to enter a surreal universe where energy, mass, and the speed of light intermingled in a way no one had ever suspected. But there was one last mathematical ingredient that Einstein would need: the everyday process of squaring.
Yeah. So this is the joke, right? So they took each piece of this, E, M, and then, the concept of speed squared, and so now they're, and this is where the whole, girl physics comes in with the mystical story. So maybe I'll jump ahead to that. I don't know if I can do it here. So 2 is for squared. This is just such a huge miscalculation. I mean, just such a huge, it's not really relevant. Doing the c squared thing isn't really relevant. Einstein could have just put the number. He could have just put a fantastically big number. So he could have just said mass times the density of the energy in the universe, and we'll call that number, 17 times 10 to the 97. And you could have been done with this. I mean, it's just a real number. It has nothing to do with squaring anything. Well, anyway. Let's see, can I jump ahead here? Not very conveniently, so I guess we'll have to go back to the browser to do it. So let's do that so I can get to the right point in the video. Alright, that's not the one, this is the one. Come on. This tab, please. Alright, we'll go do something like 100 and something. 101, somewhere in here. This is where it all goes south. Yeah, right in here. Well, we'll have a little extra. Okay. Now this whole thing will disappear again when I get rid of this, and I have to get this back again. I don't know why it does that. Firefox. It's nice to be able to do this pop-out window thing. But yeah, it does have little bugs that are weird.
Her own. Much to the horror of her mentors, she even dared to suspect that there was a flaw in the great Sir Isaac Newton's thinking.
Alright, so let's understand. Newton was meticulous in terms of the experiments he did. Meticulous. So if this wasn't noticed by Newton, this living force, right? Newton didn't see any living force. He didn't see any connection where, you know, if I did this conversion, I'd get 4 times the amount of energy. Even though I only have half the velocity, I somehow have 4 times the energy. So it's just this magical amount of extra energy I have, and then it goes back to being normal amount of energy again. So whenever I do these conversions, only when something's going faster does it have the living force energy, and then it loses it as soon as I make it go slower. So Newton would have discovered it. He would have seen it. He did like I said, he did a ton of experiments. And so here some people start doing, some rich people start doing some sloppy experiments, and now they're going to tell Newton what the reality is. And that's how, you know, that's the real story here. You know, some silly rich people, you know, did some experiments that were kind of stupid and not very thoughtful, and that became the new physics. And it's really bad physics. It's Sasquatch. They saw Sasquatch through their little crooked mirrors, right? So they started measuring energy by having things plow into clay blocks, you know, that are on a table. No, even worse, right? I mean, I've sort of pointed out how the energy reflects on the surface you're hitting has a lot to do with whether it's going to slow you down or not. If you move faster than the reflection of the energy back, then you're going to get a lot further into the material. But if you're moving slow enough where you're going to actually feel the back pressure, then you're not going to get as far. Obviously not a very good way to measure energy. So there were parts of this that, you know, the other video cut out, so I just think they're sort of important there's little scenes here that are kind of important.
Newton stated that the energy of an object, the force with which it collided with another object, could very simply be accounted for by its mass times its velocity.
Right, and it's in there. It's right there in front of you. There's nothing else there, okay? The kinetic ball doesn't go 4 times as high. All right? It doesn't happen. It only goes twice as high when the velocity is increased. The velocity is increased, it's twice as much velocity, half the mass. It's that simple relationship. It goes twice as far. It doesn't go 4 times as far. So this energy doesn't have any reality. It doesn't exist if you do the right experiments. If you do the wrong experiments, it exists. If you do the right experiments, it doesn't exist. There's no place. You can't see it. It doesn't show up. The living force is dead. Okay, so it's, you know. But this is just so, I mean, it's so funny in the sense that they're just overtly portraying this, and they're basically showing you how this is when science turned into religion. They're showing you one of the exact moments where they allowed religion to enter science.
In correspondence with scientists in Germany, Du Châtelet learned of another view, that of Gottfried Leibniz.
And it's just so wrong. So, yeah. It's like I said, he's choosing the wrong material to judge energy, to test energy. It's a broken lens. It's a crooked lens. It won't show you the truth.
He proposed that moving objects had a kind of inner spirit.
So listen to this, okay? This is what he proposed. This is what he wrote. This is his theory. This is what he's saying is the scientific truth.
Called it vis viva, Latin for living force.
Living force, right. So there's magical energy now. We have just regular momentum here, Newton's mv, and all of a sudden now we have to account for some new thing that exists inside of it, this living force. And yet it doesn't show itself when you do the experiment, Newton's cradle. It won't show itself. It won't make itself apparent at all.
Many discounted his ideas, but Leibniz was convinced that the energy of an object was made up of its mass times its velocity squared.
And let's understand, they didn't even have the right formula. We later had to change it and put a half in front of it. So it was 100% off in terms of establishing the real energy. What we've decided now is the real energy. It was 100 times too much energy. And they had to cut it in half because it was 100 times too much energy. Okay? Now the joke is the half, it's still 100 times too much energy. It's more than 100 depending on how fast you make something. The faster you make something go, the more preposterous your number gets. So they have a formula that basically says the faster I make something go, the more joules of energy it has. I just give more momentum to it. Now they won't call it momentum, but basically that's all they stuck with. It has to be momentum. They've given it more energy.
Taking the square of something is an ancient procedure. If you say a garden is 4 squared,
I mean, this is like the totally wrong illustration. You know, the great illustration for squared is just doing the 2-dimension thing, right? Just making the obvious argument that you can make something bigger this way, or you can make something, and then if you make something bigger this way, it's a much larger area that you have to account for. You know, when you add the 2 dimensions. 1 dimension, you know, 1 little square. 2 dimensions, 4 squares. Yeah.
you mean that it might be built up by 4 slabs along one edge and 4 along the other. So the total number of paving slabs is 4 times 4, 16. If the garden is 8 square, 8 by 8, well, 8 squared is 64. It'll have 64 slabs in it. This huge multiplication, this building up by squares, is something you find in nature all the time.
Yeah, I know, but it's in a totally different context. It isn't in a kind of context where you can just make energy this way. So they're basically saying we can just make energy this way. Make things go faster, they have more energy. Even though you'll never be able to convert it backward. You'll never be able to grab any of this energy because it doesn't really exist. So the train's going 12 miles an hour and weighs 1 ton. We bang it in completely and efficiently into another train and cause another train that weighs 2 tons, twice as much, to go 6 miles an hour. Well, we've lost half our energy by their theory, by the calculation. If I do the calculation on the 2 trains, the one that was going 12 miles an hour and weighs 1 ton, and I do the calculation for the train that weighs 2 tons and is going 6 miles an hour, their calculation says the train that weighs 1 ton that's going faster has twice as much energy. And now it lost half its energy. But the trick is I can bang it into another light train, another train that weighs 1 ton. Okay, I'll bang it into that, and all of a sudden I'm going to have all of that extra energy back again. Where was the extra energy when it was in the train that's going 6 miles an hour? Okay, that weighs twice as much. It has less energy. How can it make another train have more energy? How can you end up with, 200 joules, then you go down to 100 joules, and then you go back to 200 joules? How would that be possible? Because those are the facts. That's what the experiments will show. So how does this Viva whatever bullshit make any sense? It's just religion. They just shoved a piece of religion right into physics.
Emily, you have...
So this is the demonstrating Volta. Okay, so Volta wasn't really a scientist, but you know what I mean. He's pissed. All right, so obviously at least Volta understood this is religion. You're putting religion into physics.
Being absurd. Why ascribe to an object a vague and immeasurable force like...
Yes, vague and immeasurable. So there was already people who knew you're just measuring it wrong. Okay, it doesn't show up in Newton's cradle. It doesn't show up in other object. When I do experiments, there's no evidence of this extra viva forcey thingy, this living force. There's no evidence that it exists. So why are you shoving it into physics?
Vis viva, it is a return to the old ways.
Yeah, it's religion. That's what he's saying, right? So it's funny. He must have wrote this crap. That's why they put it in this story. So there must have been a bunch of Voltaire statements where he's basically saying, yeah, I can fuck this bitch, but she's fucking wrong on this subject.
It is the occult.
There, he's calling it the occult. I mean, yes, this is Sasquatch physics.
When movement commences,
When movement commences, you can't really hear some of this because they play the music too damn loud. So when movement commences,
it is true that a force is produced which did not exist until now.
right? So it is true that a force is produced that did not reveal till now, or something like that. Yeah, so they need subtitles because they really do fuck this up.
Think of our bodies.
Think of our bodies.
Free will, we must
To have free will, right? So now free will is part of this subject, right? So apparently that was part of her writings too, that we have free will, and that would be the living force showing itself.
be free to initiate motion. So all my
Free to initiate motion. No, we don't have to eat our vegetables. We don't have to acquire the energy for our motion. We don't have to steal it from other organisms. No. And we're stealing their momentum. Momentum vectors.
this is asking is where does all this force come from?
In your case, my
So where's this force come from, right? So there's no answer for that. Where does it come from? Where does it go? Where does it hide? How come it hides when it's moving in the slower object? How come it's gone? You can't find it. You're saying the object has less joules of energy. It hits something else and now it produces more joules. So that's free energy. This is like Ken Wheeler physics. This is like whatever it's Eric Dullard physics. This isn't real physics. We made more energy just by banging something into something else. Bingo, more energy.
idea of the force, I am sure, is primeval.
Primeval, something like that. So that's where the source of the force is, because she's kind of a native, Amazonian bitch or something. Yeah, she's crude and rude.
Oh, you're infuriating. You hide behind wit and sarcasm. You only think you understand Newton. You're incapable of understanding Leibniz.
Right, incapable of understanding Leibniz. Right, and so the point is he's incapable of understanding him because it's a mysterious, magical, non-scientific force. It's not a real thing that you can experimentally find. And the only way you can find it is to use a crooked lens. A ferrocell, what do you call what are those stupid ferrocell? What do they call that thing? Ferrocell, right? They have some other word for it. Well, anyway. Yeah, so use some fake device to make up your fake physics.
You're provocateur. Everything you do is about something else and makes trouble for you. Criticize this, denounce that. Are you capable of discovering something of your own?
I discovered you!
Yeah, there you go. Good comeback. Alright, let's see. I think they say something
Despite
here.
the overwhelming support for Newton,
Alright, despite the overwhelming support for Newton, which might be despite the fact that most of the real scientists knew you can't deny all these experiments that say this force doesn't exist. It doesn't show up. It can't be measured. The spring doesn't see it. Why doesn't the spring see it? Why doesn't gravity see it in the Newton's cradle example? Why doesn't it show up in all these other experiments? That's what they were saying. If it's real, why doesn't it show itself consistently?
Du Châtelet did not waver in her belief.
La, 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 la. Okay, so this part we already saw. The clay, drop your lead balls, blah, 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 blah. So, might be worth playing just for the fun of it, but yeah, I can't go forward in this box, which is really kind of irritating. But there might be something worth something in the summation, because that gets to they say stuff, so it's probably worth getting to. So I'll skip. Well, let's just play it. It's well made, so why not?
Eventually, she came across an experiment performed by a Dutch scientist, Willem Gravesond, that would prove her point.
Okay, so Leibniz says, and then Gravesond does the experiments, apparently. So I don't know what experiments Leibniz did to come up with this theory. So his must have been some other ones, and then this other guy does the clay experiments that seem to verify it.
And in Leiden has been dropping lead balls into a pan of clay.
Dropping lead balls into clay. How very imaginative.
Using Newton's formulas, Monsieur Voltaire, he then drops a second ball from a higher height, calculated to exactly double the speed of the first ball on impact.
Well, so we know that doubling the speed, I guess, in the other video I was, confusing that a little, but I mean, obviously to double the speed, you double the distance, because gravity is consistent. It's always applying the same amount of force, extra force. But anyway.
So, Monsieur, care for a little wager? Newton tells us that by doubling the speed of the ball, we will double the distance it travels into the clay.
No, so Newton didn't say anything about clay. So Newton just said that the amount of energy you have, the amount of momentum increase in the object. Every object's going to have a different amount of momentum, but yes, the momentum, if you have twice the distance, you have twice the momentum at the end. Because the force is applying the same amount of extra momentum consistently through the whole process. Well, almost the same, obviously. 9.8 and then 9.87683828, 4 or something.
Leibniz asks us to square that speed. If he is correct, the ball will travel not 2, but 4 times as fast. So, who is correct?
So we know, like I said, there's just no argument here. You won't see this on a pool table. You won't see this in all kinds of different ways that you can do this experiment. You won't see it. You won't see this extra energy, this squared velocity.
Monsieur, I feel Mr. Newton's reputation dwindling ever so slightly.
Oh.
Right, so you're just basically, just as I pointed out, it's basically just you. A real scientist did real experiments, and then a bunch of, I like being a scientist kind of people, decided they would do the new physics. And so they really didn't do it rigorously.
Oh, mon père, we do not succumb to there is no earthly reason to ascribe hidden forces to this Dutchman's lead balls.
So I wonder if Voltaire actually wrote that, in some pamphlet somewhere. That would be kind of funny. It's a good joke.
Well, the ball travels 4 times further.
And again, this is just because clay has a bias. Fast things get through it better than slow things, period. That's why you have a different result. Has nothing to do with actual amount of energy. It's a poor measuring device. It's a bent lens.
Turns out Leibniz is the one who was right.
Okay, so it doesn't turn out that way. You could still do old Newton experiments and see that it doesn't turn out that way. There's no evidence that that's the truth. I don't even understand how any physicist who thought about it for a minute couldn't realize this can't be true. You can't have momentum vectors, right, and somehow not account for the fact that they have to go somewhere. And that's all you have is the momentum vector. You can't make it longer for free. If something's going to have more momentum, it has to get it from somewhere. And you can't give anything more joules of energy and say it doesn't have more momentum. It's just impossible.
It's the best way to express the energy of a moving object. If you drive a car...
Amazingly stupid. So they always use this car example, right? Where you're using the same braking mechanism even though you've doubled its energy. So you double its energy and use the same braking mechanism. Okay, the same size tires hitting the road. You're using friction, right? A really poor measure. Friction's really bad at treating things going fast the same way it treats things going slow. Friction is the worst possible measuring tool.
20 miles an hour takes a certain distance to stop if you slam on the brakes. If you're going 3 times as fast, you're going 60 miles an hour, it won't take you 3 times as long to stop. It'll take you 9 times as long to stop.
Oh, well, it does seem worth consideration.
So by other experiments, it won't. Okay, so if you crash your car into a spring, all right, a wall with a big spring in it, all right, that'll measure how much energy you have. It won't be 9 times. That won't be the right answer. Okay, you'll get the wrong answer. So if you do your test and do it by an actual real good experiment, you'll find that you failed the test. Your equation gave you the wrong answer. Your prediction of 9 times will be way off. Not a little bit off, way off.
Perhaps we might look over his calculations.
If you attempted to convert that energy into another car moving, right? This 9 times the energy, right? If you tried to convert it into another car by hitting another lighter car, you can't get the same amount of momentum out of it. You're not going to get this extra energy.
I have already checked his figures. I'm sure Leibniz is correct on this point. I intend to include a section on this matter in my book.
Really? Do be careful, madame. Do you think the Academy is ready for such an opinion?
Quite. We really should be careful.
Really? I see no reason to delay. There is no right time for the truth.
Right, and so this is how you all go wrong, right? We all need to believe in UFOs, and we all the truth of the UFOs, and the truth of the flat Earth, and this is pretty close to flat earthy kind of science, right? I mean, it's just that sloppy. Clay tells me so. You know, this is looking into tea leaves or something. You know, the special tea leaves.
Emily du Châtelet published her Institutions of Physics in 1740, and it provoked great controversy.
As it should have, right? Because again, they have conflicting evidence. Other experiments don't demonstrate the living force being real. So there's good reason to doubt it.
Voltaire wrote that she was a great man whose only fault was being a woman. In her day, that was a great compliment.
All right, this part we don't need. Oh, I'm pregnant. I'm going to die. Probably don't need it. Yeah, we both. I don't know. There's some other little piece of crap that was said by somebody here that I'd like to hear. So let's just jump ahead a tiny bit and see if it's there. And change. Let's get over with. Oh yes, and she died. Blah 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 blah. Okay, somewhere in here maybe.
Châtelet had tried to rise above the limitations placed on her gender. In the end, it was an affair with a young soldier that led to her demise. 6 days after giving birth to her fourth...
Yeah, amazing. You know, that this has happened all through history, you know, that women would die. And, it kind of stuns me that there's no commentary really by the men, you know, the writers of history, writing any kind of lament, you know, about how difficult it is to go on with your life and with any kind of enthusiasm after you've actually killed somebody, you know, by making love to them. You killed them. I mean, that's a lot to live past, right? Is this realization that this, you know, this act of love killed somebody, you know, and that you're responsible. Essentially, your gratification came at this insanely stupid price. You think there would be some stories about just how to live past that? How do you step over that corpse and tra-la through the rest of your silly little life? I mean, if I was that soldier, I'd be, you know, looking for a way to die pretty quick. Yes, I'll go first. Let's see if I can catch a bullet, because I can't go anywhere from here. I mean, especially when you killed an accomplished woman. Yeah.
Child, she suffered an embolism and died. Emily du Châtelet's conviction that the energy of an object is a function of the square of its speed sparked a fierce debate.
Well, at least that's good. At least it's good to know there was a fierce debate. Apparently the wrong side won, but it's good to know at least some people were saying, what are you talking about? This is mush.
After her death, it took 100 years for the idea to be accepted.
So, well, I think it got accepted in 1800 with Young's endorsement, but whatever.
Just in time for Einstein to use this brilliant insight to finally bring energy and mass together.
All right, to use this brilliant insight. So I really don't think it's anywhere in Einstein that he's using this insight, but whatever. You know, maybe it is somewhere in Einstein's theory that you can do this multiplication of energy. You can create more and more joules of energy just by making objects lighter and faster. And therefore you can just make more and more and more and more energy. Just by scraping off some of your extra mass, you can you know, just magically make yourself more energetic. It's just so bad. You can make your, you know, I don't even know how to metaphor it, because it's energy you already have. I mean, obviously, if you have an engine running and you cut your mass off, you're going to go faster, but not 4 times faster, right? That's the catch. It's this whole 4 times as much thing. No, you can double it. You can't, you know. If you cut off mass, you make your velocity more important, but you also make whatever's mass is left more important. Both of them, how do you even, you know, no, there's no way to say it. I won't attempt. The momentum is spread across whatever mass you have. Yeah. But anyway, it's just fundamentally wrong. It gets the wrong answer by a long shot. And the fact that physics has somehow been able to incorporate something that's fundamentally wrong, 100% off, I mean, huge amounts of volumes of off in terms of getting the right answer, and yet they'll talk about how precise their mathematics is, and how precise their predictions are. Well, if they're doing it with this, they're obviously cheating somewhere, because they can't possibly be getting right answers. All right. So I guess next time I'll deal. There hasn't been much in the comment sections, just you're wrong kind of bullshit. When no, I'm right. So anyway, but this does illustrate anyway that you have some indication that maybe I'm right. That oh yeah, physics took a wrong turn here, because nobody really checked on it. Nobody did any real disciplined, hard work to see if, you know, that we could find a really good test instrument and verify once and for all whether this, you know, this love force existed, you know, that they ended up calling kinetic energy. So I think again it was Young who termed it kinetic energy, turned it from the living force and then called it kinetic energy for some reason, even though there's no reason to call it that, because it doesn't really show up as momentum, and momentum is always kinetic energy. So yeah, there's just no, you know. But there's good reason to doubt, people. Very good reason. Alright, so enough of a video, I imagine. So we'll throw that in and do a little of this just for the fun of it. And say till next time and such.